David, did that give you chill bumps there listening to that?
Man, I tell you what, that Larry Munson, I'd given anything. And look, let me tell you, Scott Howard, the voice we have now was unbelievable. But that Larry Munson, I sure would have loved to see what he would have said in that game this past weekend in Pasadena. That was something else.
David, I was talking to Philip Pearson yesterday. I said, I need a good Georgia guy because I got just the guy, David Greene. Let me text him for you. Now, you know, deep down, Philip's really pulling for Alabama. You know that, right?
Oh, he's not.
Let me tell you, he better not be. We'll have to talk to Coach Fox about that one.
Yeah. Good morning, David. How you doing?
Man, doing great. How about you guys?
Doing great. Dad, go ahead. Take it.
I know that I want you to comment on the importance of the quarterback and the offensive lineman getting along. Maybe a stupid question. I'm not talking about buying a mistake and all that kind of crap. I'm talking about the really important. You know, I get a lot of word over there that there's a difference. There was a difference between Eason and Fromm, just as a person, and I'm not knocking him. A kid goes in there and plays after a guy gets hurt and stays in there, which is sometimes not normal. But I think Fromm is probably easier in a cafeteria to talk to than Eason is. That sounds stupid, but those two questions kind of go together. Talk a little bit about, not necessarily the two quarterbacks if you don't want to, but about the relationship between the offensive lineman and maybe these kids or when you played.
Yeah. Well, there's no question. I mean, it's important as a quarterback for your offensive line to like you, number one, because if you don't have a good relationship with them, you're in trouble because those are the ones that are keeping the defenders off of you. Yeah, I will say this. I've only been around Fromm a few times. You can tell by the way he carries himself and everybody that knows him. The kid, he's a good kid. He's humble. He's likable. It almost sounds too good to be true, to be honest with you, when you talk to a lot of people that have been around him his whole life. He's got a great demeanor. He doesn't need really a pat on the back. He's confident in himself, but he's not arrogant. And those linemen, those are the guys that, they normally don't like to have their name in the paper. They don't like quotes. It's always the lineman's the tightest group on the football team. And when you got a quarterback, even though he's, in the limelight, he's kind of a stud, he really kind of acts just like one of the guys. Those offensive line, they'll do anything for him. And you can tell that this football team has rallied around him, not just now. They did it way back in September. I don't think there was when he stepped in, I mean, I was blown away. I was at that first game, and I was sitting here thinking, going, "Oh my gosh, this kid's a true freshman. He's got to play the first game in the first quarter. This thing could go downhill." And I tell you what, really from day one, he has just looked like that he's been doing it for 20 years. And having played that position, I'll be honest with you, I've just been blown away the way this kid has handled himself, because he's been in some really high-pressured situations. I mean, no bigger than the one at Pasadena. That kid had to make some big-time throws late in that game when it was all on his shoulders, and he's delivered time and time again.
We're talking with David Greene, former quarterback at the University of Georgia. David, when you look at Alabama and Jalen Hurts, you're a former quarterback, and the things that Jalen can do, he's a different quarterback than you were. I look at your rushing stats. You threw the ball great. Jalen runs it. Doesn't throw it great. But what's your opinion of Jalen Hurts as a quarterback?
Well, I'll say this. One, I think Jalen's got great mental makeup in the fact that the moment never seems too big for him. He's a great competitor. I mean, let's face it, this kid was a true freshman last year, took the Tide all the way to the national championship, and really, I mean, he could have easily won that game last year. Has brought him back there this year. Now, of course, he's got a great supporting cast, but I'll say this, being a dual-threat quarterback is so difficult for defensive coordinators to try to defend against, because a guy like Jalen, he can throw a great deep ball. I mean, we've seen time and time again where he's burned people and hit Ridley deep and things of that nature, and he can make plays with his legs as well. So it could be a 3rd and 10, and where most quarterbacks that are just pure pocket passers, if that pocket collapses, they're in trouble. They're having to throw the ball away, the timing's off, they got a punt. With Jalen Hurts, he can make you pay with his legs, and then he's got that athletic ability too, where I think he's a better passer than what a lot of people give him credit.
What has Kirby Smart meant to Georgia? I think Mark Richt was a great guy. Everybody loved him. He did a good job recruiting, obviously, because the cupboard was full, not full, but there's a lot of players there when Kirby got there. But he's got that in-your-face mentality, and that only works if you win. If you get up in people's face and get after it and you don't win, then sometimes those guys will turn their back on you. What has Kirby and his mentality meant for Georgia football?
Well, Kirby has brought a confidence, I guess, raised the bar from an expectation standpoint as well. You know, we're not here just trying to get moral victories, and not saying it was ever that way before. But he's been able to raise the level. So it's not just about, hey, we want to compete for the, SEC championship every year. I mean, he's had sights, and he's kind of learned that blueprint from Coach Saban over at Alabama, how to build something much bigger than that, where we're competing for national championships year in and year out. I mean, I think a great example is, this early signing period for the kids in high school. We signed a bunch of 5-star recruits, and I don't think they're not hooping and hollering and high-fiving over there. They expect it. And I think when a coach sets the expectations high, and then the kids start seeing that it's working, they start buying into it. And I think that's why Kirby, he loves Sony Michel and Nick Chubb, Lorenzo Carter, and Roquan, because those guys are the ones that he had to sell his plan to. And he sold it. They started having some success. They balled in, and those leaders have, had the rest of their teammates buy into it as well, and they're kind of seeing the fruits of it right now.
Yeah, Dave.
Kind of interesting that the new football coach at Tennessee, his defensive coordinator is going to be one of the defensive guys at Georgia. So they're sort of going against each other, and they're going to be coaching mates after this game. Talking a little bit about Georgia's line, I felt like that they controlled the line of scrimmage in the second half against Oklahoma, where they didn't in the first half. I thought Georgia did a really good job of getting their guys' heads screwed on correctly at the halftime when they were a little bit lost.
Yeah, there's no question. And Coach, you said it. I mean, that first half, I don't know if they were just trying not to make mistakes, or they were confused or not trusting their instincts. But defensively, I mean, they were just taking it to us. I mean, it was like watching a track meet, is what I was telling one of my buddies. Those guys were marching right down the field. Second half, we started trusting our instincts. We started playing with an edge that you have to have. And look, the way we play in the second half is the way that Alabama typically always looks on defense, where they smother you. They're going to get up, play man coverage. They're going to whip you at the line of scrimmage. You're not going to have time to throw. When you do, it's going to be incomplete because you got guys like Minka Fitzpatrick back there that are covering and just being disruptive. You got to win with your mindset and the intensity in which you play with. But the thing that I had a lot of respect for both Georgia and Oklahoma in that game is that momentum flip-flopped probably about 5 or 6 times in that second half, where, we made some plays and it seemed like we had all the intensity and we had the momentum. And then sure enough, Oklahoma would fight back, and they would start making the plays, and they had the momentum. And it just went back and forth. And the one thing that's so hard to do as a player is to change the momentum of a football game, because once it's going against you, it's very hard to get that sucker turned back around. And both teams, man, they were able to keep flipping that momentum late in that ball game.
We're talking to David Greene, former quarterback at the University of Georgia. David, as you see this particular game, now you got two really good defenses going against each other. Obviously, both teams want to run the football. Do you see any weakness on either side going into this game with either team?
Well, I'll say this. I think, unfortunately, I do think Alabama matches up against us very well, maybe to Alabama's favor a little bit. Of course, we really like to run the ball. I mean, there's no question about it. You got guys like Nick Chubb and Sony Michel. I don't think there's any shock here. I would, bet my house that Nick Saban's going to say, look, I'm going to make Jake Fromm Wims outside and Terry Godwin beat me, I'm not going to let Nick Chubb and Sonny Michel be the ones that are going to beat me. So if I'm Georgia, I'm thinking I would almost expect there to be an extra guy in the box on every play. They're going to get man coverage, and he's going to say, we're going to put Wims on Minka Fitzpatrick, and Jake Fromm, you're going to have to beat us. But the one thing I would do, honestly, if I'm a Jim Chaney offensive coordinator at Georgia, I would try to find a way, because they're going to see a lot of man coverage. I would try to find a way to get DeAndre Swift, our true freshman, or Sonny Michel on their linebackers in space one-on-one, because that's the one area that Alabama has been depleted. And if Nick Saban is going to, if the whole game plan is to line up and stop the run, and you're going to get man coverage, I want Sonny Michel on their linebacker one-on-one in space. And instead of trying to hit deep bombs to Wims when you got a guy like Minka covering them, I'm going to try to hit Sonny Michel or DeAndre Swift on option routes over the middle of the field and let him run with it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I'm a big guy mentally, always have been. I would say that the mental chip really is on Georgia's side. But I will say that the guy that does the best job of getting his team ready to play, regardless of when you think they're maybe not going to be ready, is Nick Saban. I don't know what happened at Auburn, because I didn't think they were ready to play. Comment on the mental chip. Is it on Georgia's side?
You know what, Coach, I would honestly say I think both coaches will have their teams ready to play. I think Georgia, coming off that emotional roller coaster victory in Pasadena, I think Coach Smart actually has a little bit more to overcome, just because it was emotionally such a draining. Plus, we were in California for a week, and so they got to get back and try to regroup and get ready for this game this week. Alabama, on the other hand, they came out there and they whipped Clemson. I mean, it almost looked like a regular season game. We just went out there and just took care of business and getting ready for the national championship game. So I think Georgia, in my opinion, has a little more to overcome to try to regroup and get ready for this game. But having said that, I think both programs will be very ready for this game. I expect the both out of both teams, and I certainly hope that's the case. When these tickets are going for $2,600, $3,000 a piece, you want to make sure both teams show up, right?
Yeah. How many people have you had text you or call you, David, say, I just need two, David. Can you get me two tickets? Have that happened to you this week?
Let me tell you, it's happened. It's happened about 20 times yesterday. It's happened a few times this morning. Normally my response is, hey, I need two tickets as well. My kids aren't going to the game, and I'd like to try to find a way for them to go as well. They're not easy tickets to get, and I promise you, just because you played there in the past, doesn't mean that the athletic department called me, when we won, said, hey, Greene, you want 20 tickets to the game, and how about some sideline passes? It doesn't happen, I can promise you.
Tell us about the Georgia fan base. I got a buddy here. He's a big Georgia fan, and I was absolutely amazed at that Notre Dame game, how many Georgia fans found their way into that stadium. The fan base has just got to be beside themselves over there right now.
Georgia fans have been starving for a great team. Now, look, we've been good for a while, but they've been starving to be great. And it has shown this year where, Kirby's kind of set the blueprint, and it's working, and the fan base is going berserk. I mean, Notre Dame, that was a home game for Georgia. It really was. It was probably 70% Georgia fans, and it's amazing what the Georgia fans are spending doing all this, because let me tell you, the Notre Dame trips and going to Pasadena, those are not cheap trips. And then about to turn around and no telling what, a bunch of fans that were in Pasadena are turning around and buying tickets to the championship game. So we got some wealthy fans, and we got some fans in some major debt, one of the two. But one thing's for sure, they are going to support the Dogs, and I imagine, they'll be out like crazy this on Monday as well.
You got a score for us, David?
I don't. I'll say this, Coach. The one thing that you can't ever predict, and it sounds like a cliche when saying this, but it's so true. You never know the way a game's going to flow, and that's one of the reasons when I played. When people talk about the butterflies, I never really had concerns of how I was going to play or whatnot. you just never know how the game's going to start and how, the way it's going to flow. So I do think it's going to be a lower scoring game. I think it's going to have to be, because I don't think, we're going to be able to light up Alabama's defense by any means. So I think, in Georgia's favor, we're going to have to try to keep it lower scoring. I would say somewhere around in the, mid-20s to high teens, somewhere in there.
Well, David, you didn't say who was going to win. Oh, you're saying Georgia.
Well, let me tell you, I think Georgia's both teams can win, but I'm certainly going with my dogs. I promise you that.
I'm going to have to tell Philip, though, about you. I'm looking at your Twitter bio. It says Braves, Packers. Dad, listen to this. Braves. Well, first it says Ephesians 5:15-16. Braves, Packers, Duke basketball, and the Georgia Bulldogs. Why Duke basketball, David?
Well, here's the deal. That's not even my Twitter account. I don't even have one.
Oh, really?
I'm like a dinosaur, man. I just I don't Facebook, I don't tweet, I don't do any of that mess.
So somebody's acting like they're you.
Well, I don't know if they. Yeah, I do know someone opened a fake account back in the summertime because my phone started blowing up where people said, "Green, welcome to Twitter." Finally, finally, and I said, "Well, guys, that wasn't me." It still ain't happened yet.
Follower of Christ, husband, father, UGA All-American. It's got you a big advocate guy, so I don't know. Somebody's acting like David Greene out there, so that means you're pretty important when somebody puts out a fake Twitter on your behalf. So
it must have been my grandmother or somebody like that, right?
David,
thanks a lot, David. Appreciate
great
it.
stuff. We appreciate you being on. Great stuff, and I'll tell Philip. I'll send Philip your check. How about that?
Sounds good, guys. Appreciate it. Y'all have a good one.
David Greene, great guy there. Good interview.